All my talks, all the talks I give, wherever I'm invited, are on the topic of Buddhism or meditation. They're the only two things I really talk about. And of course, when I talk about Buddhism, it is primarily from the tradition in which I was trained and with which I am familiar. We call that the Theravada school of Buddhism, which is the form of Buddhism practiced mainly in Southeast Asia, or sometimes I refer to it as the Southern School of Buddhism, because it's the Buddhism that spread south and southeast from the original geographical location of where Buddhism began, which was in the Ganges Valley of India. That's where the Buddha lived and taught. And the great, if you wish, propagation of the Buddhist teaching probably took place during the reign of Asoka the Great. And that was probably, I think, 3rd century BC. And he sent out missionaries to spread the word of the Buddha north and south and east. And it is said that his son, he sent one of his sons, who was a Buddhist monk, to Sri Lanka, which is a Theravada Buddhist country. Another missionary was sent out to the land of gold. And there's a great dispute as to whether the land of gold was Thailand or Burma. The dispute is between Thailand and Burma. Nobody knows where the land of gold was. But the Theravada form of Buddhism has thrived and continues to be the dominant form of Buddhism practiced in those countries: Sri Lanka, Burma, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia. And it was also it thrived for a while in Indonesia. However, in Indonesia, it almost completely disappeared. So this is the nature of history. Is you get the great, if you wish, growth and then the decay of everything in every place. How many empires have arisen and then fallen away, and new empires come up, and they seem as if they're going to be great and thriving forever, only to collapse after a certain length of time. And this has been happening throughout history. And it continues to happen, and it will continue to happen, because it is the nature of existence, the nature of mortality, as represented by this artwork here, which we call it the Tibetan Wheel of Life, because it is, as far as the artwork, it's of Tibetan origin. And there's many varieties of it. And if you were to visit Tibet or Nepal or India, you'll find that these sort of depictions on temples and monasteries all over the place. Not so much in the Theravada countries. In Sri Lanka or Thailand, this is not common. So the fact that I'm more of the Theravada tradition, and yet I'd like to present this one this evening, is because though the artwork, it may be peculiar to a particular culture, in this case Tibetan culture, it's a symbolic representation of certain central Buddhist teachings that are true for every form of Buddhism, because they are some of the essential core teachings that the Buddha set forth. So this is a teaching tool that was developed probably before the development of PowerPoints and YouTubes. And when you want to find out something these days, you go on YouTube: how to change the brake paddings on my wheels, how to replace a faucet, how do I become enlightened? You just go to YouTube. Well, it wasn't there. And so, people created pictorial representations, and then they put it up on the wall, and some people came along and they were told this is what this means, and this is what you do, this is what happens. So it's a teaching tool that does have some very, very relevant aspects of what the Buddha spoke about. Because it is important to know that Buddhism isn't a philosophy or a theory or some abstract thing. It's actually the teachings of the Buddha. That's what's, what Buddhism is. Buddha Dharma is the teachings of the Buddha. The Buddha lived in India, a historical person. For 45 years, he taught. I mean, what did he teach? That is, when I came across Buddhism, that was the obvious question that arose in my mind is, well, what did he actually say? I'd like to know. And it's, of course, difficult because they didn't have tape recorders. And again, we don't have so readily available records of what he said, but there are scriptures that have been preserved for millennia and handed down by very dedicated practitioners and followers of that tradition that preserve those teachings. And I have certainly confidence that even though not every word may be exactly what the Buddha spoke, but certainly the core teachings are preserved within those scriptures. And that's where some of these pictorial things come about based on some of the core teachings, say, of Buddhism. So this is kind of an interesting picture. I kind of like it because, one, it's kind of, it's got that really ugly looking demon there, and it's kind of frightening. But then it's got some very interesting characteristics. For a start, I kind of like the, like there's the Buddha there. I like that. He's pointing to something up there. And then we've got this whole mass of whatever that is. But it's got significance. So right at the hub, right there, in the hub of the wheel, and it is a wheel, a lot of the symbols pertaining to the Buddhist teachings are represented in the form of a wheel. And the hub, the core, if you wish, of that wheel, around which everything spins, you will see, it's kind of maybe not so clear to you, but there are 3 animals. It's supposed to be a pig, a snake, and a rooster. I think they represent what the Buddha was pointing to as the core issue of why the rest of this wheel exists. And what the pig and the snake and the rooster represent are the 3, if you wish, fundamental defilements of that obscure, defilements of the mind that obscure realization of truth. And the pig is, I don't think it's fair really when we do this to animals. I really have a bit of resistance, but don't take it literally. The pig is given the task of representing delusion or ignorance. That's not very nice, is it? Actually, pigs are supposed to be really smart. But in the early history, they were thought to be kind of stupid because they roll around in the mud and they eat anything that comes their way. Kind of people thought they were pretty, even in Western culture, we say pigs. But usually we mean it for a glutton, which would be greed, which in this case is represented by the rooster. Rooster is kind of craving and greedy. And the snake is the quality of aversion or anger. So greed, hatred, and delusion are the 3 core defilements, if you wish, or the 3 poisons in Tibetan traditions. They call them the 3 poisons. Poisons is I don't really like that. The 3. I kind of like defilements because it gives you the impression that they somehow obscure. They obscure Poison is good in that they sicken you, but it tends to imply that you're going to die. But that's unfortunately not the case, not permanently anyway. So these are three core defilements of the mind, propensities, tendencies that are common in the human and living beings. That means that we can't and have not, and as long as these are present, will not realize truth. They will not realize truth. You could say, it's the state of being unenlightened. And so there is greed, hatred, and delusion are the root causes. Around that, the next little wheel there is a kind of a diagram of the process of rebirth, the karma. And it's usually just one half is black, one half is white, meaning that you can either go down or you can go up. And so you could go down. And in Buddhist teachings of reincarnation and rebirth, unlike maybe some of the teachings, I think in Hinduism and certainly in the Theosophical tradition, where often it is taught that once you arrive at a human birth, that it's very you don't go down again. Buddhists kind of don't have a one-way street. It's kind of a two-way street. You can go up or down, and actually you go up and down and up and down and up and down and up and down, as long as you stay in the cycle, as long as you stay in the realm of birth and death, as long as you're in conditioned existence. In mortality, there is no security, there is no absolute guarantee that it is change, and it is a two-way street. And then the next area, these next sections, you see it's divided usually into 6 sections. It can be 5, it can be 6, are representing different realms into which beings can be reborn. In the Buddhists, we're generous. It's not just a choice between heaven and hell. We give you lots of choices, lots of heavens actually, and quite a lot of hells as well. In some of the early scriptures, in the Theravada tradition anyway, we talk about the 31 realms, the 31 planes or 31 realms of existence, into which beings can arise, be born. Of course, in some of the higher realms, not born in the usual physical realm, because they are very super refined non-material realms, and so there's the spontaneous arising of devas not devas, brahmas, the radiant gods. But beings are born in such a realm. They arise in some way in such a realm. And wherever there is an arising, there is a passing away. None of the heavens in the Buddhist cosmology are permanent. Not one of them. And none of the hells are permanent. So that's a fair trade-off. I mean, they are all part of the mortal existence, where there is birth, there is death. And just as it is in the human realm, no one who has been born can expect that they are going to not die. Being born implies that you signed a contract. Every one of us signed a contract. I don't think we signed it with our pen, but everyone made an unbreakable and it doesn't matter what you do, you can't break it. You can't get out of it. Some contracts you can get out of it. Go to court and plead ignorance, and you can get out of some things. This one, no. When you agree, when there is birth, there is death. There is no way around that. That is just the nature of the balance in the conditioned realms. And I say realms, they're all conditioned. The Brahma realms, the Deva realms, the human realms. and the animal realms and the Preta realms. These indicate some of the realms that beings, here they only show 6, but there's refinement of some of these. Up here is the devas, or the gods, if you wish, the various gods. And there's the sensual gods, and then there's the refined form gods, and then there's the formless radiant gods, and it goes up and up in refinement. But they are all mortal to the extent gods are mortal. They're born, or they arise in that realm because of good karma, and they pass away. And when they pass away, it's pretty sad. The Buddha said, there's nothing more frightening when the gods realize they're mortal and pass away. Because actually being in a God realm or Deva realm is, you think we're all, especially in the Christian tradition and many traditions, like to be reborn in the celestial realms. The Buddha said that it wasn't the most favorable birth because it's so easy to be complacent. It's so easy to just be lulled by the comfort and the distraction of pleasure. And some of us can relate to that because although we are in the human realm, we are actually living lives that are pretty close to the Deva realm. We no longer have to struggle for survival. We have lots of comfort. Comfortable beds, comfortable seats, delicious foods, TV, and smarter phones than where we are, and myriad things to preoccupy and distract us. So the Devas have even more than that. Now, how hard is it for us to make a little bit of time to meditate? How hard is it for us to withdraw and put things aside and just settle back and be peaceful and make some effort at disciplining the mind? People, when I teach meditation, one of the first things is, well, I don't have much time. No, because we're so busy and we make ourselves very, very busy. And a lot of the busyness is not through necessity or related to earning a living or sustaining ourselves physically. A lot of the busyness is in the form of engaging for distraction, sensory preoccupation, sensuality. Now, Devas, they have a harder time than we do. They never have time to meditate. They're just blissed out all the time with all their pleasures. They just never get around to it. And even though their lifespans may be so incredibly long, they'll come to the end of it without having made any effort at all. Human realm is a bit better because there is pain. And there is some reminders, hey, got some work to do. This is not, the whole thing. This is not something that is satisfactory or satisfying. But we are in a fortunate situation. Other people, you see down here, is the hell realms and the animal realms and the Peta realms. These are called unfortunate rebirths. There's more pain, a lot more pain in those realms than pleasure. So the hell realms, and they've got, in Tibetan Buddhism, they've got the hot hell and the cold hell and the lots of ways to be miserable. And when you're in a hell realm that's so uncomfortable and so unpleasant, it's hard to make time for meditation. You're just struggling all day and all night. And there are human beings, not in hell physically, but whose lives are so hard. Right now, they're just struggling just to get water, just to get food, just to survive. That's a really hard life. And when you're struggling for survival, living in a really harsh environment, dangerous environment, life or death at every moment, it's hard to turn your mind, let me sit down and be peaceful and meditate for a while. You're just preoccupied with survival. So even in the human realm, there are these extremes. Animal realm, yeah. People ask me, do you really believe that you can be reborn as a fly or a cockroach? What we believe is irrelevant. I mean, you can believe it or not believe it, I don't know. But I have no difficulty opening my mind that if there is strong inclination, there is a strong affinity for a certain state, a certain quality, that the mind inclines towards that quality. Some human beings, they're much worse than animals, actually. If a human being can live just under the power of instincts of self-gratification and self-preservation and exploit and no consideration for the feelings or respect of others, and just live a life as in the jungle, it's possible one can be reborn in the jungle. I don't know. But the Buddhist teachings is that it's possible, just as it is possible, of course, for any being in these lower realms, the hell realms or the animal realm, eventually to rise up, because we all have a big storehouse of karma, both good and bad. Eventually the good karma runs out for the devas and they sink down to a lower realm. Eventually the bad karma of some being in the lower realm is used up and some good karma comes up and they're reborn as humans or devas. And an important thing, and I think this is why in Buddhism we like the wheel rather than a linear representation, is that in Buddhism we don't talk about a first beginning. There is no first beginning. Existence has no first beginning. Existence is, and that's that. Existence has no first beginning. And this is sometimes a little difficult to grapple with, and you may ask, well, why? Because that's the nature of existence. Because if you say there is a beginning, the next question would, what was there before the beginning? And people pose all sorts of possibilities, but if there is, then it's existence. As soon as you say, well, at the beginning there was, okay, there was, it's existence. No. Before existence there was. Okay, there was, that's existence. It's existence. If it exists, if it's there, it exists. Either it's there or it's not. And this mental calisthenics that a lot of people like to play with in terms, well, in the before before the separate, before the distinction, before there was the whole. And often people try to say that the conditioned arises from the unconditioned. And that is, again, it just doesn't make sense. It just does not make sense. The conditioned that cannot arise from the unconditioned. Conditioned states arise from conditioned states. Existence arises from existence. And so in the Buddhist teachings, again, these are teachings. They're not dogma that anybody has to take as... the truth is something to be verified for oneself. These are just teachings, whether or not, we have an open mind, whether or not it's up to us individually to verify and find out what the truth is. But in Buddhism, there is no original beginning, original point where existence begins. There is existence. And existence means this led by craving, blinded by ignorance, beings arising and passing away from life to life in one realm or another, from realm to realm, beginningless beginning, and it will continue as long as the fuel for it is there, and the fuel is those greed, hatred, and delusion. Blinded by ignorance, led by craving. Where there is craving, there is aversion. They're just two sides of the same hand. Blinded by ignorance, led by craving, we continue in this process of rebirth, ever becoming, striving to become again. And so beings exist in these. This is another interesting realm. They call this the Preta realm, the hungry ghosts, very close to the human realm. And you know, these realms, not only, we can think of them as existing somewhere, but we can also see them as qualities in our own mind. I mean, sometimes we do act like animals. Sometimes we are kind of pretty, burning up with anger or hate or lust, and it's like being in hell. People, we speak like that. Boy, I had a hell of a day. Yeah, I just spent a day in hell. I went to the hot hell today. Or sometimes we just feel really dull and stupid. As one of my teachers said when asked, what's wrong with the water buffalo? What's wrong with the life of a water buffalo? They seem so placid. And water buffaloes have big bellies and big nostrils and usually munching away. And he said, well, it's just a big heavy body and a dull mind. Sometimes that's all we are. Just a body and a dull mind. And we go about life in that way. So, it's kind of a little bit like a cow or a buffalo. The hungry ghosts is like these beings that are in a realm where they are, like they call it disembodied spirits. Usually reborn in that realm means that you still have such strong attachment. Many humans are reborn in that realm. You still strong attachments to the human realm, or the physical human realm, but you pass away and reborn and want to stay connected, want to remain involved and engaged. But you're in a new realm, disembodied. You have no body as such. So you cannot really partake. And so they linger around, trying to be present and trying to interact and trying to engage, but always being frustrated by the distance and the separation. We feel that sometimes, wanting something, but we can't quite get it, and we're kind of frustrated. It's like hungry ghosts, as they call them, cannot be satiated. And a lot of the spirits that people who are more sensitive usually see or perceive or notice, especially in the Theosophical society, are some beings reborn in this realm. It is not that they're not reborn yet. They're already reborn. It's a new realm, but they have still a close proximity, lingering, attaching, wanting to engage. Best thing we can do is wish them well. Please move on. That's not a very nice realm to hang around in. Another realm that's the demigods. These are sometimes called gods. They're the asuras. They're titans. They're like Vikings. That's the heaven of the Vikings. What was the heaven of the Vikings called?
Valhalla.
Valhalla. The whole of, and all they do is eat and fight. They're reborn there and they love it. That's all they eat and fight. And so these are the Viking heaven. These are the asuras. They're warrior, like titans, and they like to engage in combat and fighting. And they often fight not only amongst themselves, they often fight with the gods. And so that's part of the mythology. But, do these places really, are there realms of existence like that? I mean, I believe that if something exists in the mind, there will be a corresponding realm of existence for that quality where rebirth can take place. And we certainly can see these, if you wish, realms within ourselves, the different states of mind through which we move in the course of a day. And some of us have developed strong tendencies and habits that push us and keep us in a similar realm for good portions of our lives. So that if we have developed a strong tendency to be angry and, just have a very hot temperament and short temper, and always getting angry and frustrated with everything and all the time and going around abusing and shouting at people, that's a hell realm. You're living in a very negative hell realm. And some people are just very, by disposition, very, joyful and happy and very positive states of mind, a lot of light. And that's, it's a Deva realm. It's a physical human body, but in a Deva world of life. So the world that we live in is the subjective world of our inner emotions and mental states. And it's very instructive for us to really look and see what sort of world do we spend most of our time in? What sort of realm do we, are we reborn in most of the time? And it fluctuates quite a lot. And we go from, we usually go from one to another, but the important one to try and become conscious of is the predominant tendencies, because that's the one that's going to drive our karma for the future as well. Our predominant tendencies. So these are the realms of existence. And then the next, this rim of the wheel is interesting. And there are 12 links on that rim. And that is a teaching of the Buddha that was called Dependent Origination. And it is a description that explains how this process of birth and rebirth comes about, how the law of karma operates, why existence continues, why we remain on the wheel. And furthermore, it offers some insight on how to get out of it, how to get off the wheel, and to come to liberation from the realm of birth and death and get out of the grips of this monster that is time limited, or everything that is in existence is impermanent. It's continually in a state of change, becoming something else. Impermanent, transiency, that is the nature of existence. Everything in existence is in the grip of impermanence. Everything, every realm. Now, if we understand that, we will be able to comprehend why conditioned existence can never fulfill us. Conditioned existence can never give us true permanent happiness, fulfillment, security, or be a refuge. Now, it's a leap, but try. Conditioned existence is impermanent, transient, changing. If something is changing, continually changing, becoming something else, how can it give you what it is that you want? How can it fulfill your desire for happiness, refuge, security? Because that's what we're craving for, that's what we're seeking for, fulfillment, happiness. And if you tell me that you're not, there can only be two possibilities. Either you're enlightened, in which case I think you should be up here, giving the talk. Or you just haven't looked very closely. You just haven't looked very closely at how our lives seems to be always in this driven, being led with a thirst for fulfillment. We have this chronic sense of lack, a chronic sense of lack that drives us forward. And also, we have this belief, it may be more than a belief, it's a commitment that we can get this fulfillment from the sensory world, from the world out there. And so our effort is to get, to acquire, to obtain more and more. And in the hope that we will then get enough and we will be happy and fulfilled. Take it from me, but you don't have to believe it. There is nothing, absolutely nothing, and there is absolutely no one, no place that will fulfill us. Okay, there is no thing, no place, no one that can really fulfill or make us happy. The world is not enough. Now, that does not mean there is no happiness in the world, there is no, bliss or joy. There is, but it's impermanent because it's dependent on that which is impermanent. So there is happiness and unhappiness. Good births, bad births. Happy realms, unhappy realms. And this is in the conditioned realm of existence. So the Buddha, sort of contemplated the human predicament, and he kind of, boy, this is kind of unsatisfactory. This was the great turning point in the life of Siddhartha Gautama at the age of 29. The historical scriptures talk about the great renunciation. At the age of 29, Prince Siddhartha, who was just a human being, he was not a god. Very important. If he was a god and became enlightened, I wouldn't be inspired because I'm not a god. But he was a human being and he became enlightened. That's inspiring to me because I'm a human being. But at the age of 29, the story is that for the first time ever, Siddhartha noticed old age, sickness, and death. As if, he lived for 29 years, never saw an old person, never saw a sick person, never saw a dead person. Is it possible? It's highly unlikely. But I do believe that at that moment, at that time, Siddhartha saw for the first time old age, sickness, and death. But he saw it in a different way. He saw it in a way that led him to the sense of disenchantment with the mortal existence, the loss of appetite, the loss of enchantment, the loss of vanity of youth, vanity of health, vanity of life. The intoxication was broken. Now, how many of us have seen old age? I looked in the mirror today. Ben was very kind. He said that I still look the same as when I was 50. I think that's when... No, we didn't meet when I was 50. That's very kind. We always say polite things like that to friends. Oh, you look so good. You look great. Haven't changed a bit. And we're always changing. Some people more than others. Some age shows more on some than others. But we're all just getting old. That's all there is to it. We're all getting old. From the moment of conception onwards, you're just getting old. You're either 1 second old, 1 day old, 1 year old, 100 years old, but you're just getting old. And sickness is pretty universal. It's just a matter of degree. A lot of it is dependent on your karma, a lot of it is dependent on your actions in this life. And death is inevitable. Now, however, we, unlike Siddhartha, have already seen this, but we live as if we're going to live forever. Our preoccupation is still with the preoccupation of the worldly things, worldly preoccupations. We haven't made a dramatic change in our lives. Siddhartha, when he kind of had that realization of, wow, this is what conditioned existence is, he really had this change in direction. Supposedly, the great renunciation led him to seek to abandon the preoccupation with the world and the worldly concerns and family and home and money and even retirement benefits and head off on his spiritual quest, training under various ascetics and eventually on his own, seeking for the path to transcend mortality, to transcend the realm of birth and death. And at the age of 35, he had this dramatic realization, dramatic experience, a radical transformation, a complete change in view. He saw and realized the truth of existence, which is not the truth of something else, the truth of this existence in a way that shattered, completely shattered his previous view of things. It so radically shattered his previous view that those three little animals at the core of his being vanished. Shattering of ignorance, shattering of greed, shattering of aversion, shattering of ego, realization of complete emptiness, knowledge and vision of truth of this mortal existence, leading to a complete relinquishment, a complete abandonment, and a complete liberation. And that was his enlightenment. But then he said, this is possible. Other human beings can do this too. And he taught a teaching for other human beings so that they too could verify what he had verified. We too can realize what he realized. And this is probably the most I say the most compassionate gift that the Buddha gave to the world. The fact that he became enlightened is wonderful. But if it had stopped there, we wouldn't know about the Buddha. We wouldn't know about him. The reason we know about the Buddha and why Buddhism is still a living, relevant teaching and path is because of his teaching of the way for humans to train in order to verify what he verified, realize what he realized. And this is called the Eightfold Path, a path of training, designed for human beings, designed for us. And it is a very systematic training that can be undertaken by anybody. It does not require a belief, but it does require some confidence to the extent that the willingness to undertake some training, undertake some steps, to put a step forward. So in his teachings, when he first started to teach, he gave a sermon called it's called the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. It's a nice ring to it, doesn't it? Pali was the vernacular spoken in the time of the Buddha. Sanskrit was the more formal. It's the classical Indian language, and most of the Mahayana Buddhism is preserved in Sanskrit. The Theravada scriptures are in Pali. The It was a verbal transmission. It wasn't written down originally. Pali doesn't have an alphabet, so when it's written in the alphabet of, say, we write it with Roman letters. Thais write it with Thai alphabet. Chinese would have to use something else. But it's a spoken language. And this, the first sermon was setting the wheel of Dharma in motion. It's the first time he taught and pointed out some basic aspects of the nature of existence and pointed to the Eightfold Path as the way to transcend. And so these teachings usually called the Four Noble Truths. And the first truth is the truth, the cause of suffering, or life that life is suffering. This is, people who are new to Buddhism really find this quite strange, that Buddhists are so fascinated. Oh, Buddhists, they believe in suffering. They love suffering. They're always talking about suffering. Life is suffering. Oh, the noble truth of suffering. Oh, how wonderful. It's a noble thing to suffer. Those Buddhists really love. Oh boy, those Buddhists and their suffering. But in actual fact, all that is saying is conditioned existence is flawed. You don't belong here. It's the wrong place for you to be looking for happiness. And I often, used to tell the story of, I was reminded of this. I used to call him Nasruddin, was a Sufi kind of mullah Nasruddin. But I'm told that it's pronounced Nasruddin. And all along I thought it was pronounced Nasruddin. But it doesn't matter, it's just a name. So he's quite a character. He's a Sufi master, and many, many stories about him, and very meaningful stories again. So Nasruddin was sitting on a stone under a tree, and he's got a big bag of what seemed to be little hot peppers, chili peppers. The Thais have them. They're very small, red, very hot. And he had a whole bunch of them, and he's eating them. One, and he eats another. And if you've ever eaten one, they're really hot. You don't want to pop another one in your mouth. But he kept doing it, and he's, if you've ever experienced it, your eyes water, your nose runs, you're sweating, you're burning. And his friend comes by and sees him, and Nasruddin, why are you eating those chilies? Why do you keep eating those chilies? And he gasps and looks up. I'm waiting for a sweet one. This is a bag of red hot chilies. There's no sweet chili in there. There's no hot sweet pepper in there. Existence is unsatisfactory. It can never fulfill us. That's all the Buddha was saying. Existence in whatever realm, it doesn't matter if it's mortal, if it is of the nature to arise, it is of the nature to cease. Because of that, it can never be a true refuge. It can never fulfill. It cannot give us true happiness. That's all the Buddha was saying. And to the extent that we don't believe that, we're going to keep going the same way as we're going, which is led by ignorance. Blinded by ignorance, because we don't see the truth. We led by ignorance, led by craving and aversion and process of becoming and rebirth. Kind of sad story, sad predicament. The Buddha felt great compassion. He said, if you knew how many tears you've shed over the countless eons of lives, millions and millions of lives, being born and passing away from one realm to another realm, all the water in the great oceans is not as much as all the tears you've already shed. If you piled up all the bones from all the lives that you've lived, been born and passed away, from beginningless beginning, as you cycle through the realms, the mountain of bones would be greater than the Mount Meru or the big mountains in India. It sounds kind of bizarre, but if it's beginningless beginning, it means there's just an infinite number. I don't know, but the Buddha, painted these pictures to try and create a sense of, if you really do develop a little bit of disenchantment with the preoccupation with the mortal preoccupations, the worldly preoccupations, and if we are fortunate enough to come across a teaching and a teacher, especially a living teacher, who not only puts forth that teaching, but embodies it, it does have a tremendous impact on inspiring us to make an effort, to apply ourselves to the path, and that is the Eightfold Path. And not going to go into great detail with this wheel here, but you see that little guy there? You see that? It's not very clear, but that's a blind guy with a walking stick. Ignorance. Blinded by ignorance. Blinded by ignorance, beings seek for happiness, trying this, trying that. And that's brought us to this point. Because blinded by ignorance, in the past, we created karma. Karma is volition. We acted. We brought forth our effort to find happiness, either skillfully or unskillfully. But we created volition, volition is to bring forth, is to act. And it's karma. We created karma, and because of that karma, especially at the time of death, because of the inclination of the mind, people say, why was I born? Born because you want to be born. Why was I born in this body? Because you wanted that body. Why was I born with these parents? Because you chose those parents. It's you. It's not you in quite that sense, but it's karma. There is an inclination. There is an identification with certain conditions based on your karma that leads you to the arising of rebirth consciousness. The arising of consciousness in this human realm, birth is the coming together of three things: the egg, the sperm, rebirth consciousness. The rebirth consciousness arises in the conditions suitable for it according to its karma. So it's not, this is exactly where we're supposed to be. When there's rebirth consciousness, which is like a monkey grabbing, the fruit that it likes. I think that's what it looks like there. Karma was like, there you see the guy making the pots and pans, or clay pots, the potter. That's karma is creating. That's when we act. Karma is not the result. Karma is what we bring forth. When we put forth volitional actions, we shape, we create. That's going to bring about results. And one of the results it does is that when this body conks out and is no longer a suitable vehicle for experience and to support consciousness, there will be a rebirth, and that rebirth will be according to the karmic tendencies. And most human beings will be reborn as human beings, actually. And there we are, reborn. There's rebirth consciousness, and you got two guys in a boat. Mind and body. You got mind and body develops. That's the human mind and body. When you've got a mind and body, you come with the senses, the 5 physical senses and the mind itself, which is a 6th sense. You're a sensitive being. This is what we wanted. We wanted to have human senses to experience the world through the senses. We didn't want to experience the world through the eyes of a fly, otherwise we would have been reborn as a fly. It's not quite like that, but it is. It's the karma, the inclination. That's where the tendency is, that's where the rebirth is. When we're mind and body, we've got 6 senses. When you're a sensitive being, you're going to experience. You're going to come into contact with the physical world. You've got 5 physical senses, you're going to meet 5 physical objects. And that's contact. It looks like contact, they made contact. That's to experience. We want to experience. Why did we want to experience? Well, we still believe that we would be fulfilled if we only could get enough. If we could see enough, hear enough, touch enough, smell enough, eat enough, think enough, we're going to be fulfilled. But I haven't done it yet. And the Buddha said it won't happen. Because craving can never be fulfilled by acquiring. Craving can never be fulfilled by acquiring. There isn't enough. So, contact. And of course, contact, to be sensitive, is to feel. We are all feeling beings. We feel. There's feeling, an arrow in the eye. That makes it pretty. An arrow in the eye. Is that what I was born? Well, no. I mean, we feel. There's pleasant feelings, pleasure and pain. I mean, to feel. If you're receptive to pleasure, you're also receptive to pain. That's all there is to it. Now, the problem is we like pleasure and we want more of it, but we don't like the opposite. And so there's feeling. Now, up to this point, it doesn't matter whether you're enlightened or not. An enlightened person, this part of it, I know that in the past, I was not completely enlightened. I am absolutely certain of that. And actually, I'm absolutely certain that everyone here was not completely enlightened in the past. Why? Because you're born. To be born means there's still ignorance and this belief that the conditioned realm is where you belong. So I was not enlightened in the past. I end up in this body with these 6 senses and I'm sensitive and I experience pleasure and pain. And the Buddha did that too. He wasn't completely enlightened in the past. He was born, he had a body, he experienced pleasure and pain. But once he became a Buddha, things changed a bit for him, which hasn't quite happened for me. So because then there's feeling, and it's just not feeling. There is the reaction, the mental process that follows once we feel. There is the craving. There's the craving for pleasure and aversion for pain. And so this is represented by the reaching out to grab. And there is the attachment, which is just this crystallized form of craving is when you really identify with and hold on tight. And that's your attachment. And there's the monkey again, grabbing hold. And when there is craving, attachment, and that's continuing, that's going to bring about the process, that's karma. We're creating karma. Karma that's going to bring about rebirth. And so, there you are, born again. But this is in the future. This is the present up to here. This is the present, that was the past. And when you're born, again, you're going to get old and sick and die again. So, here we are. There it is, ignorance. Ignorance is not the root beginning. There is no beginning. Ignorance has no beginning. But ignorance is conditioned. There's a reason why ignorance continues. The reason is that we don't see the truth. When there's ignorance, in the past, there was karma in the past, and it led to rebirth consciousness. So that was the past. This is the present up to here. So when you're born, once there's rebirth consciousness, as a human, you have mind and body, and you have the six senses, and you experience and you feel. That's natural. Everybody does. Buddhists do that. Humans do that. Now, what happens, this is something special that we do that the Buddha doesn't do. We're the special ones, okay? The Buddha is, he's natural. He's completely natural. We're special. So we react to feelings with this, again, this craving for pleasure and aversion for pain, trying to be fulfilled by grabbing more, and that leads to more karma, and this karma is going to bring about birth again in the future. And whenever we're born, we have to go through this process of aging and dying again. And so we keep going around, blinded by ignorance, led by craving, and we go through this cycle over and over again until something has to happen. We learn once and for all that this is a useless task. This is not where we belong. Happiness is not to be found in this bag of chilies. So there is this Buddha pointing to something. Buddha pointed the way to realization. The Eightfold Path. The purpose of that training is to free the mind from ignorance. To free the mind from ignorance, we need a radical transformation, which can only come about if we are able to clear the mind. And clearing the mind is the practice of meditation. I don't mind just a little bit clear. I mean, like the mind that is diamond, the clarity that is precise, unhindered, unobstructed by any defilement, so that it can see clearly. And that is the practice of cultivating what the Buddha called meditation, bhavana, is calm and insight. Through developing of deep meditation, concentration, the mind is brought to a state of sharp awareness, sharp concentration, where it is fit for the task to see the reality or to see the truth of this conditioned existence, that it's unsatisfactory, it's impermanent, it's just a conditioned process, and there is the abandoning, the dispassion, the letting go, and the liberation. And you may ask, okay, so is the Buddha, where does the Buddha live? Is he, this is the conditioned realm, so is the Buddha is the Buddha living in the unconditioned realm? If the Buddha is living, I think it's not the unconditioned. If something, once you put something somewhere, it's existence. So the Buddha pointed to the cessation of the conditioned realm. With regards to the unconditioned, liberation, what can you say about it? It's just the end of this whole mass of unsatisfactoriness. Get rid of all that. What's left is what was never born, never dies. What is born goes to its natural end. So for the Buddha and enlightened beings, they too experience feelings, pain, pleasure. They experience gain and loss, and they get old. They get sick. They die. But not like us. Because the Buddha and enlightened beings create no karma. There is no longer any karma. No ignorance to blind, no craving, and no karma created. And that birth is the last birth. No more conditioned existence. That doesn't sound too appealing to a lot of, we want to be reborn in heaven because we want to be reborn. You will be reborn in heaven, only to find out that that too is not where you belong. It's just for enlightened beings. That's why the Buddha said, what was to be done is done. There is no more of this to come. The Buddha realized truth, was truth, realized peace, and Nibbana is the supreme happiness. Nirvana, paramang sukham, is the highest, the only happiness. Let's put it that way. So that's the wheel of life, the conditioned realm. To transcend that is the aspiration of a sincere disciple of the Buddha. And a sincere disciple of the Buddha just tries to follow the teachings and the path that he laid out to the best of their abilities. It's, being a little, people say, well, is it all or nothing? Well, no. I mean, as you understand this teaching a little, even a little, you realize that you're not a victim of circumstances. You are not a victim of circumstances. And you are not trapped by a predetermined fate or under the power and enslavement of an overreaching, powerful being. You, in this here, have choices. The choices is your will, your volition. How do we respond to life experiences? Do we come from insight and understanding, clarity, mindfulness, or do we live completely mechanically, which is just recreating the past? Or do we just act completely instinctually, which is just following greed and aversion? That's our choice. Nobody makes us do that. Everything is conditioned, but there is choice. How we respond to this moment is the gift. How we respond. And if we take the step to cultivate mindfulness, cultivate right view, right aspiration, we can direct our lives towards growth, towards clarity, towards insight. That's what the Buddha wanted to have us know. We're not helpless victims. Don't allow yourself to be a helpless victim.
First question, what does it all mean? Are we all different, and why are we in the cycle?
Well, we are all unique to the extent that there is the individuality of the stream. All streams have similar characteristics. I am the heir of my karma. I am the owner of my karma. I am born of my karma. I am dependent on my karma. Whatever karma I have done, for good or for ill, of that I shall be the heir. So what that is saying, that there is this individuality with regards to the stream of conditions and results, causes and results. So this here, is my inheritance. This is past. And this is what I've got to work with. Right now, this is the result of the past. Everything about me is the result of the past. But it's not fixed and it's not complete. It is the result of the past, but it's not fixed nor complete. The choices I make now, the karma I generate now, or the choices, the will that I put forth now, with regards to this present moment experience, is what's going to interact with what I've brought forth from the past to create the future. So this is the important thing. So there is the individuality of this experience, and it's similar for everyone. People like to talk about group karma. It's just, no, I mean, you're responsible for you're not responsible for someone else's karma. You are just not responsible for someone else's karma. You are responsible for your karma to the extent that it's your will generates certain, if you wish, certain potential energy which will bring about a result. It can affect others and others affect you, so there's the interaction. But each individual is responsible for their karma. And we inherit this karma. The important thing with regards, why are we here? Because of ignorance. Why is there ignorance? Because we're unenlightened. Why are we unenlightened? Because there's ignorance. Why is there still ignorance? Because the mind is not clear enough, fit enough, precise enough to reflect and see the true nature of this existence, so that ignorance vanishes, craving and thirst for it ceases, and there is liberation. Now, there is no beginning to it, and you can say, well, why does it exist? Well, there is existence. If it didn't exist, it didn't exist. But there is existence. Why is there existence? No, there is existence. It's like it's putting forth a question that really doesn't apply. There is existence. So what do you do with it is the more relevant question. And the Buddhist approach to it is to really, the mind can see truth that frees the attachment, or lets go of the intoxication for this realm of existence, and that is the liberation. But it's a good question. Well, why is there existence? Because you're unenlightened. Why were you born? Because you're unenlightened. I mean, if there was no existence, I guess we wouldn't ask that question.
It sort of follows from what you were saying, so thank you. I'm not entirely sure, I haven't formulated my question properly, but what's bubbling in my mind is in the mental formations area, the karma that you've come with and you're creating with, there's also a generating quality to karma that almost sometimes feels like it's running itself. Like it helps you to create, it helps you to accomplish things almost. And I'm wondering about that, does this cycle serve some sort of evolutionary purpose to go round and round it? Are we actually, is there something driving this that we're growing
Yes.
from or something? Can you speak to that?
Yes, good points. One, with regards karma is always the active. Karma is doing. You're making. Karma is never the result. There's the result of karma, karma vipaka in Pali. But karma is something you always create. That's what you're doing. That's what you're creating. It's not the result. The result is what comes from your doing, which then becomes the cause for something else. So every link, everything is both a cause and it's conditioned and conditioning. So it's like ignorance is a condition to the effect that it has a cause. The cause is that the mind is still hindered by the hindrances and doesn't see clearly. That's why ignorance exists. Because ignorance exists, leads us to create karma and from wrong view. And that's doing. We come from wrong view. So we do. And when we do, we put forth through will is the karma is when volitional action. We will. We volitionally bring something into being. When we do that, that's karma that's going to have a result. Either soon or later, it's going to have some result. And the law of karma is that positive, what we call positive willing or positive volitions will bring about positive results. Negative volitions bring about negative results. And you can think about positive and negative in terms of good or bad, but it's more like that which is detracts from well-being and that which adds to well-being. And so that's why it's bad. It detracts from your mental, physical, and emotional and spiritual well-being. It's not that it's bad because God says it's bad. It's bad because of its fruit. What comes of it? What comes of acts of anger and aversion and hatred and greed and selfishness is negative. It detracts. And you have to look at it long term too. And the same with positive, obviously. When there's what comes from a positive intention of goodness and generosity and kindness and compassion and wisdom, that's going to bring certain type of results. So that's the way karma works. It's it's completely impersonal. It's got no moral judgment about it. It's just that that's because of that law that we come up with our morality. It's not a very good, it's just positive and negative aspects of life. Now, with regards, is there a purpose to this? Oh, yes, there is a purpose. The idea is that we learn. We learn something from experience, going around, and we learn something from life. The problem is that most of us are very slow learners. And what are we to learn? Well, if you think, I don't remember past lives. I don't know. How many millions of lives we've been through trying to learn how to get happiness. But you can see it as history of humanity, all the different experiments that have been undertaken by various groups of people and individuals to try and create a better society or a better life. I mean, we moved out of the jungle life because living in the jungle and being headhunters is really not a very pleasant life. I mean, if that was happiness, we'd still be doing it. I mean, all the technological developments, but also all the structure of society has been to try and create, a better quality of life. More happiness, less pain. More well-being, less fear and suffering. So, we continue to evolve in this way. So the purpose of life is to learn, and to learn how to create a better life for ourselves, but also as we learn that, we can't have a better life for ourselves at the expense of others, because there is instability. What breeds all the problems in a society is when you have these, if there's a lot of poverty and a lot of hunger, and you can't have a stable society. When there's this great discrepancy in wealth, you're not going to have a stable society for long. So, not only for how can we create a better life? How can I create more happiness for myself, but not at the expense of others? Because otherwise that'll come back to me. So how can we create a better life for myself and others? So that's what we're trying to learn on an external level. And as we keep doing that, even at its best, we will see that it's unstable and it's always flawed. And so then it brings you to the next level of learning, which is what the Buddha is pointing to, that maybe mortal existence is not where we're going to find this ultimate fulfillment and happiness. That mortal existence cannot give this, that it's basically flawed. That this is not where we belong. We're in the wrong place for what we want to realize. And that's when the turning away from the realm of birth and death. So that's the purpose of this mortal existence, is to realize that this is not where we belong. Ajahn Brahm visited here, and he didn't give this story while he was here, but he wrote it in his book. I don't think he gave the story. He talked about this, somebody in America for a while, I don't know it, that it's a fact. He said it's a fact. Somebody invented this novelty gadget. It's a box, and you give it to people as a present. And the whole purpose of this box is you put it down, and you press it, and then this trap door opens, and this big arm comes up, and it reaches over, comes around the other side, and presses a button, and the arm goes back in, and the door closes. And it shuts itself off. That's the purpose of life, is to learn that that's not where you belong. This is not, the purpose is to transcend this realm, the mortal existence.
We have another question online. They say, thank you for your informative talk. Question is, what is meant by the phrase, samsara is nirvana?
Interesting. People say, we like to, we can say anything. Some people say things like, you're already enlightened, you just don't know it. I mean, you're already enlightened, you just don't know it. I mean, it just doesn't cut it for me. I mean, I don't know, what does that mean? Well, I mean, you're already enlightened, you just don't know it. I mean, what am I going to do with that? What are you going to do with that? Okay, Nirvana and Samsara are the same. Okay, now what are we going to do? Is that, these are sayings that are trying to, they obviously have some significance and some meaning that can be useful, but they're not very practical. The Buddha was interested in practical teachings that can help us realize something. Nobody can enlighten you. That's the first thing. The Buddha pointed out the path. He didn't walk it he can't walk it for us. Nobody can walk it for you. You have to take the steps. They can guide you. So Nirvana is the same as samsara. I guess the realization of the true nature of samsara, the conditioned existence, seeing it with knowledge and vision, as the Buddha said, is liberation. Yeah, it's nirvana. So to that extent, you say, I guess, well, when you really, then samsara is, maybe you could say it's nirvana. It's the realizing of to the core, the nature of conditioned existence, samsara. Samsara means it goes around in the realm of birth and death, mortal. Realizing the true nature of that is enlightenment. But if you're deluded about samsara, no, there's no nirvana, no enlightenment.
I have a question. I guess it's two questions. both are about inaction. So if karma is action, so if you're sitting in inaction with hateful thoughts, is that still part of karma? Are you?
Yes.
Okay.
There is inaction. I mean, karma means volition. It's speech, body, mind.
Okay.
But karma is really a mental factor. It's volition, what we put forth in the mind.
Mm-hmm.
The mind is the forerunner. Then comes, from that may come speech. And so we create mental karma, verbal karma, physical action karma. But when people say to live or to be inactive, the only person, we're always creating karma, because there is always, you see, as long as there is the sense of self, mm-hmm. we're coming from a place of self, there is still ignorance with regards the emptiness of the process. So they're still blinded by ignorance. There is craving, which is, it comes from self, the ego center. I want, I don't want. I like, I don't like. It's subjective. But it's coming from that, so we're continually creating karma, moment to moment. Even when we do nothing, we're creating. It can be good karma. Mm-hmm. It's not all karma is bad. It can be positive karma. We can put forth, whenever we have positive thinking, positive thoughts, positive feelings, loving kindness, generosity, compassion, mm-hmm. Kind of clear mind. That's positive karma. It's still karma, but it's positive, and it will tend to have fruits or results towards well-being, okay. both now and in the future. And it's the way to a happy rebirth, certainly. But it's still in the realm.
Okay. And then the other side of that is with inaction. If you see something that should be stopped, and you are inactive, do nothing to stop it, let it continue, watch it. Does that also have karmic tendency or karmic result?
Every choice is karma. The choice to say is karma. The choice not to say is karma. It's just whether or not it is skillful or unskillful, useful or not useful, positive or not positive. And that's why there has to be careful, considerate, like mindfulness is very important. Being aware, self-aware, knowing what your intention is, being able to correctly see the situation. What is the best contribution that I can make in this situation? What is the best contribution? Clarity, then based on your understanding, your wisdom, your intelligence, what is the best way to deal with this situation? What can I choose here that is the best? And sometimes, the right thing is to say nothing. Sometimes it is to say something. And sometimes it is to do nothing. Sometimes it is to do something. Now, that's why the faculty of clarity, mindfulness, the faculty of right aspiration and right view, which comes from careful, it's intelligence if you wish, but wisdom is very important. What is my intention in life? My intention is based on my understanding of the law of karma. I would like to have an aspiration to bring forth intentions of generosity and kindness and compassion and clarity, rather than greed and hatred and cruelty and stupidity. So that's my intention. Now I've got to be able to implement that, which requires I have to be awake. I have to be circumspect in understanding a situation. And I have to remain present so that I'm not just reacting on old habits. It is a process of training. Now, for an enlightened being, There is nothing to do. They are natural. It is natural. There is no ego. There is no self. What comes from them is spontaneous, and it can only be that. The pure mind of a Buddha or an enlightened one is always coming from loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, equanimity, mindfulness, wisdom. That's all there is. They create no karma. It's just a natural, spontaneous, choiceless.